So you thought it was all like sort of guts and glory and.
We all thought that until we hit the beach, and we saw the bodies and we saw the casualties, and we realized, hey, the game is over. This is it. Kill or be killed. My name is Don Greenbaum, born March 10th, 1925, in Wynnefield, a great neighborhood to grow up in. I had the privilege of going to military school, my last half of my high school education. So when I was drafted in the Army, I had a little idea of what it was all about. I could load a gun, I could shoot a gun, I knew how to march. I was way ahead of the average guy who was brought into the Army. My parents both come from the States. My dad and mother were both involved in World War I. My dad with the Air Force as a mechanic, and my mother drove an ambulance. So when I went there, they had a pretty good idea what I was up against. I have an older brother who went the other way. He went to the South Pacific and write me letters and say, "Dear Don, I can't tell Mom and Dad, things are so horrible over here. Please keep it a secret. The Coke machine broke down. No Coke for 24 hours." He write me these letters. Or he say, "Don't tell Mom and Dad because things are really ugly over here. The pool, we're going to clean the pool today. We can't swim for 24 hours. And I'm in a foxhole getting these letters. So it was great. Anyway, my life started in the Army June 25th, 1943. The Patriotic War. We all wanted to go in. Anybody who was 4F was devastated. So our entire class of guys in Wynnefield area were ready to go and fight the enemy, the Germans. Now my first, so I was sworn in on June 25th, 1943 at Camp Rucker, Alabama for my basic training. And they taught me how to dig a foxhole, how to repair my rifle. But the big thing was they showed us movies of the Germans being trained to kill us, and we were being trained to kill them. At the age of 18, the motto at Rucker was, "Kill or be killed." I was drafted, and the head of my military school called the head of the draft board and said, "If you defer Don for 6 months, we'll make him an officer." And they would not defer me. So I went in as a private like everybody else. As it came out, most of the guys who graduated 6 months later became officers, first lieutenants, and 90% of them didn't make it. You know, they were infantry. I had a break unknowingly by going into the artillery. So we were at Rucker for a couple months for the basic training, and we were then sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I became a radio technician. And my job at that particular time was to be a forward observer. Now, forward observer is a guy who actually goes ahead of the company, the artillery. My job, I drove around in a Jeep with Smitty. I had a 50 caliber machine gun on a tripod and a pair of binoculars. And our job was to go out and find the enemy as close as we possibly could and radio back to the artillery. And then we had to watch where the shells landed, if they were too far left, too far right. And we spoke a certain language as to where up or down, high or low. And our job was to make sure, if possible, that our artillery would find the enemy and destroy them.
So you had to, I guess, watch and
Oh, yeah.
and see from a distance where they were falling, making
right.
sure that they hit their target.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And what was that like for you? Did you?
Well, if we hit something that was great, you know, if we were off the target, we'd say so off, left, right. I forget the language we used. We spoke Morse code a lot, but not over radio. You know, we learned Morse code. I was taught how to take a radio apart blindfolded. In case I were in combat with radio, I could still manipulate it.
What was the Jeep like?
What you see today, the Army Jeep, but it had a tripod with a 50 caliber machine gun on it, which I stood by all the time if I was standing up, and my binoculars to look at the area and radio back coordinates.
So you must have you must have been extremely familiar, I guess, with the radio. Was the radio like?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I could take it apart blindfolded.
You think you can still do it today?
No. I'm in trouble turning it on. So we trained at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. We played games with it, practiced it. And finally, the day came where we left out of North Wales, England, to go to France. We landed in Omaha Beach, actually Utah Beach, and there was no resistance because we came in after the invasion. What we did see was the dead bodies and the casualties, knowing now the game was over, we're now at war, going to go into combat. From that day on, the 283rd spent 268 days straight into combat, and we covered 11,500 miles in air and sea. We traveled all over the place. Now, the 283rd was not obligated to be with any one corporation, regiment, or army. Wherever they needed us, we were there. So we worked our way through Belgium and Holland and France and Germany. The resistance in Holland and France wasn't that bad. We were given flowers and kisses and wine from all the people who we liberated in the small towns. Until we hit Germany. Now the resistance got very heavy. And Smitty and I, my driver, we did well. We went all through the place. Fortunately, nothing happened. It was very smooth because our guys were going through pretty fast. November 9th, 1944, a German forward observer spotted us before we spotted him. Our Jeep was destroyed, and Smitty and I were both sent to a field hospital. We were in the hospital for a good 3 or 4 weeks to recuperate. Then I was given a very, very tough job. I had to go to Paris for R&R, which was great. Well, unfortunately, we got a call to come back that the Germans were getting a large army together to try and bust through our lines. And every man that could walk and carry a gun was called back from wherever he was to get back into combat. It's called the Battle of the Bulge, which is the most famous battle of all times. If the Germans had penetrated that bulge, we'd have been in a tough spot. After the Battle of the Bulge, we went on and we got involved with Patton's army, and he was going to Germany so fast that they couldn't keep the supplies up to date for him. Finally, we were told that outside of Munich, there was a supply depot. Our next objective was that now the weather broke. It was now March going into April. We moved along pretty well, and we were told about a supply depot which contained arms, ammunition, food, and gas for the tanks. We went through Holland, went through Belgium, went through all the small towns. Each was a battle of some sort, but there were certain ones they gave ribbons out to. You know, I go through. It's funny. I go through a small town like I was a conqueror. I'm riding a Jeep, 50 caliber machine gun, my binoculars, my hat, and kids they throw me flowers, they give me wine, the girls are kissing me. It was just unbelievable. Like I was a conqueror. And then you leave the town, you go to the next town. American flags, whatever got them, I have no idea. But we were liberating all these people. It was a very sincere showing.
And so,
except Germany.
Except for Germany.
Yeah, they didn't accept us too good.
No.
I crossed the Rhine twice, and we knew exactly what was going on.
So what was, I guess what was that like when you?
Well, we knew at that time, going into March and April, the war was coming to an end shortly, because they were running and we were pushing hard. We were just flying right through every town, and they knew the end was coming, and that's why they formed the last line was the Battle of the Bulge. They got their entire German army, our entire line, and we hadn't called up all of our reserves. We'd have had a problem.
Did you ever cross? I guess you must have crossed into an area that you had called artillery, you know?
Oh yeah, sure. To see destruction. Mm-hmm. Yes, we would go see what we hit, hopefully we're trying to hit other artillery that are 88s if we could, which was a devastating piece of equipment that they had. It was the finest piece of equipment in the Army, 88. That's what hit us. Well, when the fighting stopped coming on the other side, we knew we got them. So we just kept on going and looking for more. Actually, I had a choice. I could have carried a 60-pound radio on my back and received orders from some other forward observer to give up to the artillery. But I decided, since I had the choice, I took the Jeep and Smitty, so I could ride, not walk.
What was the?
What Jewish boys become forward observers? You gotta be nuts. On April 29th, about a mile outside our object, Dachau, there was a tremendous odor we couldn't identify.
Did you know?
We had no idea.
You had no idea.
At that time, no one ever heard of a concentration camp or a death camp, so we didn't know what it was. Well, we just thought it was a supply depot. We had no idea what it was, and there was no resistance when we came in. We really thought it was a supply depot because there was no one there. And then we saw was the barbed wire, the prisoners. About a half a mile in, the sky got black. There was no sky. It was just black smoke. And we saw the boxcars on the railroad car.
And this was during the day?
Yes. And therefore, we knew what it was. The odor was coming from the bodies, were decomposed bodies. Hundreds and hundreds of bodies just stacked up in boxcars like pieces of wood. When we finally entered the camp, along with the 45th Infantry Division, we found these poor souls in pajama-type uniforms, striped pajamas, hardly could talk or walk. They weighed like 85 to 90 pounds. The ones who could help, helped them. But we knew we couldn't feed them because they could hardly get through the barbed wire. We radioed back to the troops behind us to bring food that they could drink, only liquids, blankets, and medical supplies to help these poor souls. And there were thousands of them in the camp there. Reaching Dachau was, to this day, and I'm going back almost 70 years, the odor still was there, if you think about it. And the sky was black, there was no sky. We didn't know what it was. We found out the crematoriums. Dachau and Ritchie was not a death camp. It was a political camp, it was a work camp. As the war went on, they turned it into a death camp with gas chambers. We met a French priest who walked us through the camp to show us the gas chambers, the machine gun pits, and the crematoriums. The Germans who were there, the guards, mixed in with the prisoners to try to hide. But the prisoners knew who they were and killed them. We saw the boxcars with the bodies, so we knew something was really wrong. It was really a death camp at that particular time. Never hearing the expression concentration camp. See, there were also political prisoners in there. You know, they killed everybody. They killed 12 million people, really. 6 million were gypsies, people with the undesirables, the political prisoners, and most of them Polish. A lot of Polish people. If you weren't German, you were dead. The population of Philadelphia is 1.4 million people. Now, visualize Eagles games, visualize the Phillies games, visualize Penn State with 100,000 kids sitting there, visualize the mall, people running around. Multiply that by 4, and you get to almost 6 million. That's how many Jewish people were murdered by the Nazis. 1 million children, 2 million women, and 3 million men because of their religion. And I'm going to hammer that into the kids. And right now, in North Korea, they're rounding up and killing Christians because of religion. So you kids are the next generation to grow up and stop this. On May 8th, the war was over, and we all started on our way home.
Did you, were you still experiencing combat?
No, combat was over. Mm-hmm. And the guys behind us came in to relieve us to take care of the so-called survivors. This is the entrance to Dachau concentration camp, which we were told was a supply depot. We found it was not. We were absolutely shocked. Unbelievable what we saw.
So that's the first thing you saw that day, or
no,
was it?
The first thing we saw was the boxcars. First thing we saw as we entered the area, the boxcars, which were full of dead bodies. And then we found out where the odor came from.
And so who took these photos?
These were taken by a medic named Dick Kiley, who was our medic, who had a camera with him. He lives in Florida. Then we got into the camp, went into dormitories and everything.
What was your reaction when you saw those
Absolute horror. Absolute horror. They were just thrown like pieces of wood.
Had you ever seen anything like?
Never. Before I went in the Army, I had never gone to a funeral. Had never seen a dead person. Was never shown anything like this.
So how did you react?
Mad, angry, sorrowful, unbelievable. And then we found out they were all Jews in there. It really killed us. I mean, it really hit me hard to think they were only killed because they were Jewish, for no other reason. But the reaction, I'm trying to think back, because I wore a mezuzah on my dog tags, and when the survivors saw it, they wanted to kiss the mezuzah, and I was looking for it. I lost it throughout the years of moving here. They wanted to kiss the mezuzah, and whoever were able-bodied, we got them a truck with food and whatever they needed to send them back. Most of the fellows I met were from Paris. They spoke French. But every nationality was there, every language was there. I spoke a little bit of French, which I had learned in high school and college. In high school, some French, so I could identify and communicate with them. Say, je désirais manger, stuff like that, could you want to eat? And we did send some back to Paris at that particular time. We had no idea, the odor we couldn't identify, but when we saw the boxcars, we knew it was a death camp. And that's how when we entered the camp, we found these poor guys behind the barbed wire trying to tear us through to welcome us as liberators.
And how did that, affect you when you, I guess, afterwards, when you kept having to push into...
Well, I guess I grew up pretty fast. Luckily, the war was over the next week, and life changes. I got out of the Army 6 months later. This picture was taken in Colbar, France, when we captured the town, and I grabbed the swastika flag, which I put on my body. I've had copies of this. This one has, on one side is Hunk Gebert, who passed away. There's an Irv Benshanker, the guy that was called the Dirty Jew, I told you about him. And I'm in the middle. I'm the middle guy.
So what was it like being with those guys all the time?
It was great. It was great. We were very friendly. When I wrote home to my mother, she would call the other two mothers and read them my letter. Oh, here's one. Here's one of Jim and myself with the little girl in France. What does this take? This is Jim and myself in the picture. I'm on the right as you look at the picture with the little girl.
Is that in Germany?
This was in Germany, yeah. This was April 43. Can't be 43. If it was at 43, it was not Germany. Huh. I don't know where it was. I thought it was. Maybe it was France. Then there's one of Irv, myself, and Hunk in the snow. This was taken June 10th, 1945. So the war was over. We're on our way home. We stopped to get a picture taken. So this was just before the Battle of the Bulge, probably. January 10th, 1945. So the Bulge was over January 25th. Wow. We must have taken that time off. That's interesting. I called Hunk's kids, and I said, I serve it with your father, and they weren't too interested in talking to me. I was very disappointed. This was taking the barracks. I guess when I first got in, I was with 135 pounds when I went in and when I came out. Ours also had there was a pole that stood up over the Jeep, because the Germans were putting wires across the roads and would decapitate us as we drove the roads. So we put on our Jeep a pole with a hook on it, which would snap the wire before we got to it. Yeah, a lot of guys were decapitated that way.
And you just had to, I guess, like weld one on there?
Well, the government did it. The transportation area, I guess, they took care of it. But every Jeep had to have one after that, because we were just losing guys going down the road and getting cut in half.
When you were, as a forward observer, were you worried about certain things like that? What were your concerns, I guess, when you went out?
Well, our concern was we weren't going to get hit. It was our first concern, that they wouldn't find us. The second concern was that we hit our target. I was a T5, which is a 5 technician, and one night we were out on patrol, and we came back, we were pretty beat up, and this Sergeant Wainwright, I'll never forget, Wainwright said to me, "You guys are all yellow. You know, you came back yellow, you guys know what the hell you're doing." And I punched him in the mouth, and I could have been court-martialed. And the captain said, "Greenbaum, your stripes are going." He torn off my arm. And he and I were pretty good friends. And I said, "Captain, I think I stripes to shove them up your ass. I don't need stripes." He eventually cracked up. Wainwright cracked up. We found him in a basement of a house, shaking all over. He just cracked. They sent him home. So I ended up being a PFC, private first class.
What were the politics like at the time? Like before the war, during the war, after the war?
I was never really involved. Everyone loved Roosevelt until we found out about Roosevelt. How they turned back the St. Louis ship full of people trying to get in the United States. How Cuba turned them down. How the army was 5 miles outside of Dachau and they could have bombed the railroad tracks. He knew about it, did nothing about it. Morgenthau was in his cabinet, could not convince this man to. He said they needed the air power somewhere else. They were within 5 miles, maybe 2 minutes away from bombing the camps and the railroad tracks, just to destroy the incoming flow of prisoners, and didn't do a thing. And then we find out that Roosevelt was not a friend of the Jews at all. We all loved him. Everybody loved Roosevelt. I was discharged October 29th, 1945. Now life went on, okay? The war was behind us, a whole new life. Most of us took advantage of the GI Bill, went to college, raised a family, and all we went. Everything was great. Yeah, but then I'm back in Wynnefield. Back in Wynnefield, the hub of the Jewish area up here. No one locked their doors, it was a very calm, acceptable neighborhood. Went to college, joined the Jewish fraternity, because I was a veteran, I became the head of the house, and life just went on. And you don't think about Dachau until someone says it didn't happen. People didn't want to hear war stories. They were sick of the war, like they are today. And for 45 years, I didn't say a word about it, because I was raising a family, and life was going on. I got a job, I was working, and you forget what happened there, you know. And that's why these guys, survivors, never talk. You'll hear Ernie's story. They don't talk about it. His own son didn't do anything about it. They knew nothing about his experience.
Is it easier not to talk about it?
Or it's easier now. This is 50 years too late. This should have been done 50 years ago, so the kids who are growing up would know about it and would understand what it's all about. Now the reason we're here is because in 10 years there'll be no one left to tell our speeches, to tell our stories. So kids, go home and listen and tell your parents what you heard, tell your aunts, your uncles, your friends. If your parents, go home and tell your kids what you heard. Because we want to get the word out before we're all gone.